Well, if talent was enough, every gifted athlete would succeed, but they don't. And there's a difference. It isn't a physical thing, it's a psychological thing. Hello, and welcome to Finding the Edge podcast, a proud podcast of EdgeMind Performance Psychology. I'm your host, Renard le Roux, and this is where psychology meets performance. Before we go any further, let me explain why this podcast exists and why I'm sitting here in a chair talking to you today. Rugby was a massive part of my life growing up. It shaped my identity. It had an impact on my discipline, how I saw the world and all that. But due to a severe injury that ended my rugby playing career, I had to question a lot of things and try and figure out, how to go about it. Obviously, my identity took a knock because I was no longer the person I was. And you can only imagine the big part of your identity that is fulfilled by your own athleticism. And all of a sudden, that was gone. So that led me to obviously seek some guidance. And I chatted to psychologists and all that back in the day, as I wasn't in a great place after this injury. And that really helped me. It helped me looking for the answers and asking the questions. And that is why I'm sitting here today talking to you, because I realized back then that even though I worked so hard and did everything I could to try and make it, anything can change at any given moment. And I knew that instead of me becoming this star or achieving that goal I set, my mission now is to help others become stars and to reach their dreams. So for me, it forced me to ask deeper questions. It forced me to ask, why do some athletes rise when they need to? Why do others fall? And it also asked me, why do so many athletes, especially in South Africa, their confidence disappears in big key moments? And that's what led me into coaching. That's what led me into psychology. And that's why I'm sitting here talking to you today. And that inspired me to also study further while being a coach, while being a teacher and a businessman, to learn more about psychology up until completing my MSc in sports psychology through an Irish university. But more importantly, it led me to build EdgeMind, which you can see here behind me. And I'm very proud of EdgeMind because I realized something is very, very clear in South Africa at the moment. We train our bodies and our athletes exceptionally well. We do the drills, we condition, we gym, we teach the skill, but we don't systematically train the mind. In South Africa, performance psychology and what we do is often misunderstood. People think of it as therapy, or they might see it as something you do when there's a problem. Sort of a curative style of doing things. However, EdgeMind is different. We are science-driven, relationship-driven, and we build mental skills systems for each athlete or each individual team, custom to their tailored environment where they are. And what we do is very much structure-driven and application-driven. It is where we see results. We can also measure results, all while still making sure that the relationship and the space is created for the athlete to thrive. We take research, we take evidence, and we turn that into practical mental training tools that our athletes can use immediately. Some of the things we do or some aspects that we train would be breathing exercises, confidence building skills, reset routines, and as well as various focus protocols. So, for example, in South Africa, many coaches tend to say, focus more, do this, do that. But our kids are focused. the main thing is that we need to teach them how to focus and on what to focus. And I've seen this because I've worked at, various prestigious environments in South Africa, all the way from KZN, been in Mpumalanga, been in the Free State and in the Western Cape where I'm at now. And I can definitely say that I've picked up on the trend that, it's not just about motivational speaking. It isn't just about general mindset settings. No, it's something we need that is fresh and something that South Africa could really benefit from, so that we can look better after our performers, especially our teenagers, and to ensure that they are well equipped to deal with the pressure, and not just to deal with it, but to champion it. Today, my emphasis is on talking about why talent isn't enough always. I've worked with many athletes, like I've said, all across South Africa at various levels, not just rugby players, tennis players, tug of war. We've even been busy with all sorts of things like underwater hockey. We've worked with athletes. It's been a great journey, and I've definitely seen that our South Africans are definitely physically very dominant, and in large areas also highly skilled, and that's a great thing. And my recent travels, especially to Ireland and Italy, I had many discussions about, the rugby players in South Africa and how we are physically dominant and how we just have all the talent and this large pool of, resources, just so many players and the culture and everything. And I noticed that in those countries, they have to work so hard on being that next level, like getting to the next level. They place a lot of emphasis on things like sports psychology, performance psychology, because they generally don't have the talent that we might have. And it led me to think, imagine we can also cultivate that and build that into something stronger, and to start owning that aspect as well, how dominant we could actually become. So for me, I've definitely noticed that in many cases in South Africa, some of these really highly talented athletes who really are top performers, they sometimes get fragile in big moments. And that is something very interesting to look at. For example, one player I know that was in a top 5 rugby playing school had all the talent in the world, but as soon as there's an error, you could totally see that the confidence drops, body language starts dropping, his communication stopped, and that eventually had an effect on his performance. And those are the sort of things we need to look at, because that player should have been equipped with how to deal with that situation in a high pressure environment with scientific evidence and the relationship needed that we can provide to help him perform in that scenario. So, another player I've worked with is a sprinter. And for example, they train the best and the hardest out of everyone, gunning for essays and all that. And but as soon as that big moment comes on a Saturday, they just can't seem to reach what they do in the training program. They just can't seem to get that time that they do when they're training in the week. So many of these players or athletes have a lot of talent, but there's something that distinguishes them from getting to that top tier performance. And that is definitely the different mental preparation that our athletes are going through. So the above isn't a skill issue. It's not a pressure issue. The key here is to understand that performance and psychology meet to help our athletes dominate. And that is what this podcast is about. For us to understand what really separates performers in their various situations or codes or sports, or is to look at, in my experience, it comes down to 3 mental pillars. Because like I've just said before, and you want that athlete who is training so hard in the week to also perform well on the Saturday. You don't want her to have her nerves hijacked, to have breath shortened, to have temperature in the body rising. and have the execution collapse. No. The first thing we want to look at, a pillar that's really important to me, is to understand confidence under pressure. So in South Africa, a really interesting thing is that we sometimes think confidence is loud, whereas it's not. Confidence is really calm. So you'll see many teams have got the biggest hurrah, and the most creative and the most intense warm-ups and lots of noise, lots of energy and all that, only for them to crumble after the first half. And I want to reiterate that confidence is something that's calm. We need to understand that. It's the ability to step into the pressure cooker when things are getting tough and not panic. And a lot of people say, "Oh, Renard, you know what? He's just born with the confidence. He's just got it. It's a gift." But it's not. It's definitely something that's built. It's built through various things like preparation mentally. It's built through proper self-talk strategies. It's also something we see when athletes reset after making mistakes, instead of, the classic spiral that we see so often. And with that said, with confidence being calm, it's also important to understand that that athletes who perform so well are also emotional. They are not robots. In fact, most of my high performance athletes that I work with are actually very emotional. And that's the key. And that's what I also want to talk about, why emotions should be regulated. I've spoken about, athletes, most high performance athletes are actually emotional. We need to understand that for us to be successful and to perform well, we need to regulate our emotions. Now, pressure is a very interesting thing. I've seen many coaches, they would say, pressure, there's no such thing as pressure. No, there's no pressure on Saturday, But there is. And, some people joke and say, you only get pressure in a tire and all that stuff to make their teams think, not to think about the pressure. But that's where we fell short, because pressure actually triggers a lot of things in our body, and we need to know how to deal with this. For many, maybe there's some of you athletes listening to the podcast at the moment, but pressure has various effects on your body, like a high heart rate that gets triggered. Your breath shortens, and your thoughts start racing all around you. And, when you start spiraling and you think, "Oh no, is the coach going to drop me because I went out for a duck on the cricket pitch? What's going to happen now?" That sort of thing. Now, that is pressure in your body triggering that. And if you don't deal with that, if you don't control that response, it is going to control you. Like I said, the best performers are also emotional, but they know how to regulate. They understand how to breathe through various breathing techniques. They know how to slow down, to be calm and confident, and to regain the clarity needed for those chaotic moments that we face on the rugby field or the cricket field. And guys, this is where it's important. This isn't something that's gifted to athletes. This is something that's trained. And with understanding pressure a little bit better and how we need to regulate our emotions, it's also important to talk about the third pillar. Now, elite performers don't focus more. So like I said earlier, it's not about focus more. No. Think to yourself, if you take how intense schoolboy rugby has gotten, their whole lives are focused about that game on the Saturday. They hear it in the corridors. They hear it from ma and pa. They see it on Instagram, social media. And, the focus is definitely there. However, the top performing athletes, they focus better. And that is the key. And that's what deserves attention. If there's a bad referee call on the weekend, it's irrelevant. If the crowd is very noisy, it's irrelevant. If there's a mistake, refocus and reset. Because focus is a skill. It's something that we can help you with, the EdgeMind. And like any skill, it improves the more you use it. With the whole theme of the video being why isn't talent enough, we need to look at talent versus training and discuss that as well. So I was speaking to a coach as well recently, and we had a nice discussion, and we were speaking about teams, and we were speaking about maybe how the previous season had a much better team in terms of skill and quality, whereas this team now that he's got this year will be more based on, the camaraderie and the hard work and the ethic and the culture and all that. So I actually said to him, talent gets you noticed, but mental strength is what keeps you there. And here's the uncomfortable truth to you, the listener. Talent is actually very common in South Africa. It's something that we see everywhere. We've got enormous amounts of talent. There are so many brilliantly gifted sportsmen and sportswomen in South Africa. However, what we see in South Africa is that discipline is rare. And mental training, we see it as optional until it isn't. So when the finals on the line, and when selection decisions are to be made, that is when we see talent versus training. That is where we see how expectations rise. And that's when the gap shows. The mission of finding the edge, and of EdgeMind as well, is very simple. We want to make mental training accessible, normal, and something that is powerful in South Africa. So we might be starting in South Africa, and I know there's a lot of growth overseas, but we really want to take this global as well. It's my belief that our athletes deserve more than just physical preparation, more than just technical preparation. They deserve the psychological tools needed to perform when they are under pressure. And we don't want them just to use performance psychology or the mental skills that we have when something has gone wrong. We want to prep them before that spiral starts, before that choke starts, before they start tumbling down. Because it is exactly in that part where we need to focus. We need to focus on that part where we can get them to perform and to help them stay there and perform. Because performance isn't just a physical thing. It's a psychological thing. Yeah, and I know it's me speaking to you today, and I don't want it just to be that. And I don't want it just to be me speaking to you. I want this to be a performance community that is driven by the people around us. So every week, we are introducing something called the Edge Story of the Week. And it's a real story from any athlete, coach, parent, highlighting a moment where there was maybe a high pressure environment and what the lesson was behind it and how you overcome that challenge. So please comment your story or send us a DM and tell us about how sports psychology has helped you, because I would love to get your message across and to have your story heard. Tell us about a moment that changed your performance. We also would like to announce that we'll obviously have various people come onto the podcast to share their stories, all the way from national level, international level athletes to your local heroes. So whilst we're going to have guests invited onto the show, we would still like to highlight your comment and your story about how sports psychology helped you in a high pressure moment to be a champion. Because in all honesty, performance isn't just theory, it is lived. So in closing, talent is common, but performance tools can be trained. So if you're someone who cares about building confident and competitive athletes, as well as resilient performers, you are in the right place. Please drop a like and subscribe and comment your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to learn from you. From all of us here at Finding the Edge podcast and myself, Renard le Roux, it's been a privilege, and we look forward to chatting soon. And this is where performance meets psychology.